Absolutely. Absolutely. Really. Okay, so you'll get something to Andrea.
Yeah, I already put it in our hand.
We gave it.
Okay, great.
You know, we gotta see him coming up, right, Bob?
You see him, now you don't.
Hey,
I thought they only say that about Hasidim. Right?
I see him.
Okay.
One of them was.
What?
Okay, the next Gemara is Nadarim.
Yeah, the Durham. I mean, you have lots. The Durham is a short Gemara.
You know, it's not so short, believe me. No.
Comparatively.
Well, compared to Ksubas, it's shorter, yeah. But
705, 107. 107 block.
What? Sewers.
Yeah, about 109 block.
We have, yeah, it's about plus. We're on 106.
How far are we through? We reached the halfway point through the.
what?
Wow.
Through the Gemara?
I don't think so.
I haven't figured that out yet. I don't think we're halfway.
3 years is
Right,
January.
another year.
We had to see him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 years ago?
Yeah.
So in the springtime, we get halfway. Yeah.
Yeah, what happens is we do Nadarim next, since we're talking about it. That's gonna take us up till towards the end of January. Then we do Nazir. And that's gonna take us all the way into the middle of May.
Then I go home.
Wow. By then we'll need a haircut. Wow.
No, but that just tells you what,
Yeah. So we have 2 Masechtas practically to the
No,
summer.
how many cycles for you?
That is my third.
My 4th. I still don't know what I'm doing. So.
All right, Mention Shem, that will happen at least a minimum of another 4.
Your touchdown.
all right. Okay, so let me run through I didn't do this yet. Okay, for Year of Learning, Friends of Nina and Esther, Nechama Hasna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lazecha Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece Leah Bracha, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanuk Zundel. A Month of Learning by Sam and Shifra Coleman in memory of his mother Sarah Rachel Bas Avram, Ron and Susan Podolsky in memory of his father Tzvi Ben Pinchas. A Week of Learning by Ari and Judy Cohen in memory of her mother Hinda Bat Moshe Zachariah Halevi and his father Fega Bas Yechiel, Chaim Aber in memory of his wife Esther Bas Yaakov. And that is it. And Shem Sevalia, Crank Rafil, Velti Shir Shem Atli, and Open Israel Good Kaben Shtiar. Okay. Now, again, we got a lot of long amudim, gentlemen, so we'll do the best we can in the time. All right, we are actually starting on the bottom of Kaf Hey Amud Beis, the last line. Okay, I'm just going to review it a little bit, and then we'll go into. Remember the story ended, okay, with a story about Rav Anan. Okay, and that was the what happened, right? Okay, so right, so the gentleman comes. He wanted to bring a gift to Rav Anan. Okay, Rav Anan says, "I can't receive it." Okay, then he says to him, "What's the reason?" Okay, in other words, I want to do it because it's like bringing the Bikurim. And so therefore Rav Anan accepted the gift. He then sends a note, sends the person to Rav Nachman with a message. And the message was, Nidaine Mar Lahai Gavra, asking him to judge the situation of this man. Da'ana Anan Pasilna Le Ladina. Because I, Anan, am invalid, so to speak, to carry out judgment. All right, so that's the last line. That's where we left off. I stopped there particularly because the story really continues into the next Amud at some length. Okay, all right, so what happens? All right, So notice on the one hand, all Anan did was send a message that I cannot adjudicate this case. What happens with Rav Nachman? That's what the Gemara is going to pick up with us as we look there. Amar, mideshalo li hachi. Okay, mideshalach li hachi, since he sent me this message asking me to adjudicate the case, okay, and he did not spell out why he was invalid to do so. Okay, and remember, this is following a whole list of examples in the Gemara, which has told us that there is such a thing as shochad varim, or which we translated as bribery through words or actions. Okay, and that was the key thing, that when we saw the example that there were actions by a litigant that had an impact, personal impact on the judge was supposed to seclude himself, recluse himself. All right, so what happens? Amar mideshalche li hachi, since he sent me this, shma mina krevehu. So Rav Nachman was under the erroneous understanding that maybe Anan was a relative of this person, and that's why he couldn't serve him. Okay, not because he received a gift or did a toiva or whatever. Okay, so that's very important for us to understand as we go on now into the rest of the story and the next All right, so what happens? Hava ka'im dina diyatme kame. And Rav Nachman was in the middle of adjudicating another case regarding orphans. Okay, so now we go on to today's daf. Amar, okay, Kaf Vav. Today's daf, Amud Aleph. Hi Asay. On the one hand, here we have a positive commandment to judge cases properly. V'hai Asay. And we have another positive commandment to honor Torah scholars. So which is going to take precedence? Asay de kavod Torah adif, says the Gemara. So Rav Nachman believed that given the situation, the preference should be given to honoring, excuse me, dealing with the case of that Rav Anan asked him to do. But he's doing it unknowns to him on false pretenses. Okay, so now what happens? Salka ladina diyatme, he put aside the case of the orphans, va'achte ladine, and he was settling the case of the man that was sent in by Rav Anan. Kevan dechaza bal dine, okay, when another litigant saw the respect that Rav Nachman was giving to this person, Yikara the ka'avidle, the respect that he was giving that other litigant, istatem ta'anate. Okay, he closed his mouth regarding his claim. All right, in other words, he couldn't even present it properly. Okay, now what happens? Rav Anan hava ragil Eliyahu da'ate gabe. It was common for Rav Anan to have Elijah visit him. The hava matne le seder de Eliyahu, because he was teaching him not just halachas, but interpretations that are found in the book called Seder Eliyahu, right? V'kevan avad hachi, and since Rav Anan did as he did, in other words, he did not spell out why he had to invalidate himself regarding the case, Istalek, Eliyahu stopped visiting Anan. Yativ b'ta'anita uba'a rachme. So Rav Anan sat in a fast and he prayed for mercy. All right. Va'ata, and Eliyahu came back. Ki ata hava mebayit le ba'ute. And so what happened there, okay, is that in that situation, Elijah came back not in his, whatever his normal form was, but in all sorts of strange forms that scared Anan. Va'avad right tibuta. Okay, and what did he do then? Okay, he made him quite a box, a kind of a chest. Okay, in other words, he sat down and made him do the following: Viativ kame ada apik le sidre, and he made Anan sit on this box, on this chest, for the
He said in it.
or in it, right? Okay, in order to hear Eliyahu give all the rest of his explanations. Okay, so in other words, he was ongoing. Eliyahu was ongoingly visit and sharing him some expositions. Then, as a result of this incident, Eliyahu came back, but indicated it was going to be sort of a one-stop deal. All right, to give him the rest of the explanations and to be finished. So what happens? Vahainu da Amre, and this is why they say Seder de Eliyahu Rabba, Seder Eliyahu Zuta. Why we have two versions or two different texts. Okay, of one the greater Seder Eliyahu, which would have been the learning before the incident, and one the smaller one after the incident. Okay.
What's the significance of Rav Anan making a chest?
No, it was Eliyahu, I think, who made the chest and forced Anan either to sit on it or in it.
I'm supposed to know.
What?
He said Rabbanan made the chest and sat in it before Eliyahu.
Oh, Rav Anan made the chest.
Oh, so Eliyahu went in afterwards.
In other words, the implication is clear that Rav Anan did an act that was not appropriate by inadvertently perverting the justice, because he instead did not indicate why he had to recluse himself from the case. And therefore, it made Rav Nachman.
Sitting in it was a sign of what?
It could have been a sign of humiliation, okay, depression, but it was clear from the story that Eliyahu was not happy with him because of what he did. And the story just comes to reinforce what we were seeing yesterday about the whole issue of that even in a situation where somebody says or does something for the judge, they should recluse themselves.
See the difference between Arab Israel and America, it's called box seats.
Okay. All right, we get to a new place, a new point here. Okay? All right. B'shanei de Rav Yosef, Hava Ritcha, during the years of Rav Yosef, there was a famine, which was considered an example of divine anger. Amrele, they said, Rabbanan, the rabbi said to him, the Rav Yosef, Lebai ma rachme, let the master pray for mercy. Amar laho, and he said to them, Hashta, uma Elisha, dechi havu Rabbanan, miftare mekame. Whereas in regards to Elisha, and remember in the story, Elisha fed all these prophets and all these people during a time of famine, right? Right? Okay. When the rabbis would leave from him, his presence, havu paishe tre alfinu matan rabbanan, they left behind 2,200 rabbis, right? Ba'idan ritcha lav have bai rachme. But at the time of that fast of famine, Elisha did not pray for mercy. Okay, Anna, says Rav Yosef, Ibai Rachme, I should take it upon myself to pray, right? Mercy. Umimai de Paishe Hachi. So the Gemara asks, so why did they leave them behind? Dichtiv, because it's written, Vayomer Misharto, Ma'atein Ze Lifnei Mea Ish. What does it mean when it says the pasuk, that he says to his servant, okay, that I should give this foodstuffs to 100 men? My lifnei me'aish. What does it mean before 100 men? Ilema dekulhu lifnei me'aish. If we were going to say that Elisha was giving all this food simply to 100 men. Okay? B'shnei batzora tuva havu. During such a year of famine and difficulty, there were probably more people that would benefit, right? Ella, the kol chad v'chad, kame mea ish. Okay, namely, what happened that there was only enough food for 100 people. Okay, but he divided it up among all these different prophets. Okay, ki havu miftare rabbanan mibei Rav. Now another example, when people would leave the academy of Rav, havu paishe alpha umatan rabbanan. Okay, they would leave behind 1,200 rabbis. Mibei Rav Huna, when they left the academy of Rav Huna, havu paishe tamne mea rabbanan. They would leave behind 800 rabbis. Rav Huna, hava darish b'tleisa amorai. Okay, that Rav Huna used to use 12, I think, right? 13 speakers, amoraim. In other words, there would be so many in his base midrash that he would have to have multiple assistants. Right, thank you. Ki havu kaime rabbanan mimativta de Rav Huna. And it says the Gemara that when the rabbis would finish at the academy of Rav Huna and get up and ready to leave, v'naftse glamiyahu, and they shook off their cloaks, right? They brushed off their cloaks, okay, from sitting on the ground. Okay, you can imagine then all the dust that would come up in the air. Says the Gemara, havasalik avka b'chase le'liyoma. There was so much dust that it would cover the yoma here means day, not day, but sun. Okay. In other words, it would like Chamsin in Israel. You know, there was so much dust that you could barely see the sun. It didn't appear like it was day. It was almost like it was dark. Okay. Va'amre b'ma'arava, and they would say then in Eretz Yisrael, kamu leimi mitifta de Rav Huna b'vla'a, that they were getting up from the mitifta, from the academy of Rav Huna in Bavel. Okay. Okay, going on. Ki miftare rabbanan mibei Rabba b'Rav Yosef. And when the rabbis left the academy of Rabba and Rav Yosef, havu faishe arba me'ad rabbanan. They would leave behind, 400 rabbis. V'karu l'nafshayhu yatme. And they considered themselves like orphans. In other words, that they were there they were alone there by themselves. And when the rabbis left the academy of Abaye, va'amre la mibei Rav Papa, and others say from the academy of Rav Papa, va'amre la mibei Rav Ashi, and others say from the academy of Rav Ashi, havu faishe matan rabbanan. They would leave behind 200 rabbis. V'karu nafshayhu yatme diyatme. And they considered themselves orphans of orphans. In other words, that's all that was willing to stay behind and continue. So the implication I'm going to just suggest is remember that twice a year, okay, the rabbis would have, I guess, what we would call Yarchei Kala. Thank you, Marty. Exactly. Okay, and so huge numbers of people would come and hear them for that month. And then they would leave, and all you'd have left is, so to speak, the permanent, if I can call it that, students in the base midrash or in that particular yeshiva. That's the situation.
I think they still have Yarchei Kala in Israel, though.
They do too. Right?
No, it's amazing. We say 24,000 people choose Rabbi Kiva, right? That's crazy. But you go to the mirror in Israel, how many thousands
Students.
Lakewood.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on now to a new piece from the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Redifa, he says. Amar Rabbi Ami, and the name of Rabbi Ami. Mevakre mumin shebirushalayim hayunot lin scharan mitrumat halishka. We come back to this example where we had earlier the other day, our Mishnah, where they said whether the judges, how did the judges get their salary? And it would not be considered a shochat. Okay? So here it says that the inspectors, those who inspected blemishes for consecrated animals, they would get their salary from the Trumat Halishka, from the public treasury of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? Let's go on. Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, he says as follows. Talmidei Chachamim, Hamilamdim Helachot Shchita LeKohanim. Those sages who taught the methods of how slaughtering the animals to the Kohanim, right? Havunot lin scharan mitrumat halishka. They also would receive their salary from the Trumat Halishka, the public treasury of the Beis HaMikdash. Now remember how that money got there, right? Everybody had to give their machatzita shekel, okay, at an appropriate time, okay? And they would distribute that not all at once, but in 3 different occasions, right? Amar Rav Gidl, says Rav Gidl Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Talmidei Chachamim Hamilamdim Hilchot Kamitza LeKohanim. So those sages who taught how to do kamitza, everybody remembers how we, right? The what we call the palm fold, all right? Koren, by the way, actually has an interesting picture. Somebody must have posed, okay, to show that so people would understand that. Okay, so kamitz l'konim not lin scharan mitrumat halishka. They also would receive their salary from the Trumas Halishka, from the public treasury of the temple. Now, Amar Rava bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He says another example. Magihei Sfarim sheyibirushalayim. Those are the proofreaders of the Torah scrolls. Okay, in Jerusalem, Hayu notlin scharan mitrumat halishka. They also, they argue, should be receiving their salary from the Trumas Halishka. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman in the name of Rav. Nashim ha'argot, the parachot, those women who actually sew the prochet, the the covering, okay, for the ark, for the gates, for the whatever, okay. In my son's synagogue in White Plains, they're redoing they just are finishing up renovation of their base of their sanctuary, and the women in the shul are actually fulfilling this piece. They're doing it. Yeah, I just thought, okay, what happens? Prachos not los skaran mitrumos halishka. So these women should get their payment also from the public treasury, right? Now notice we have a whole list here of individuals who would get their yearly salary, okay, from Trumas Halishka. As we go into the Gemara, okay, as we continue today, I want us to see that this is like a board meeting, okay? This member of the board says, no, they should get their payment from it should come from this part of the budget. And this one says, no, it should come from this part of the budget, okay? That's what it reminded me of. You know, I remember, and I'm going to jump back in a second. Somebody wanted to buy in a congregation, they used microphones. So where does the money for the microphones come from? Does it come from the budget of the house committee? Or does it come from the budget of the ritual committee because they're going to use the microphones in the sanctuary? That's exactly what we're going to see, the discussion in almost a whole Amud of Gemara, okay? But it's interesting for our purposes to realize these were public funds. And how do you use properly public funds, which is I could go in politics right now, but I won't. But that is an important question. How do you use tax dollars? That's the lesson that we learn here. Okay, all right, so let's go on. Va'ani omer, now here we get the point. So Rav Nachman has said that in the name of Rav, okay, that these women get their payment for this needlework or sewing from Trumat Halishka. But what happens? Va'ani omer mikadshe berek habayit. But the Gemara tells us somebody disagrees and says, no, that should come from the budget of the maintenance of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. Ho'il u'parachot tachat binyan asuyot. Why? Because the parochet come in place of gates. I'm going to translate that in place of the building. Okay, that's what they were made. Right? Meitive. So we challenge this with a braita. Nashim ha'orgot b'parachot, those women who sew or stitch, however, the these parachot, right? Okay. Ubeit garmu sh'al ma'aseh lechem hapanim, and also the house, the Garmu family household, whose job it is to provide the showbread. Ubeit Avtinis al Maaseh HaKetoret, and the household of Avtinis were the ones who made the Ketores, right? Kulan Hayunot Lot Scharan Mitrumat Halishka. All of them received their salary, their payments from Trumat Halishka. Implication being that if it's to what degree, we might argue, sure, if it has to do with the avoda, I can understand that, because that machatzita shekel went to support the avoda, not just the animals, okay, but other things, right? So this is our question. Hatam b'davavai. There, says the Gemara, we're talking about the babai regarding gates or entrances. The Amar Rav Zera Amar Rav, as he says as follows in the name of Rav, Shlosha Asa Prachot Hayu b'Mikdash Sheni, that there were 13 parochets, okay, in the second temple. Shiva Keneged Shiva Sha'arim, 7 opposite the 7 gates. In other words, those were the gates that brought you right into the Azara. Echad Lepitcho Shel Echal, 1 that brought you into the Hechal. The Echad Lepitcho Shel Ulam, 1 that brought you into the Ulam. Okay. Shnayim B'Devir, 2 of them that brought you actually into the Holy of Holies. Shnayim Kenegdam Ba'aliyah, and 2 more, okay, above the Holy of Holies. Okay. Tanu Rabbanim. Now we get another braita. Nashim Hamegadlot B'neihen L'Para. What about those women who raised their children in Tahara? Okay, they made sure that their children were Tahor, okay, so that they could help deal with the red heifer and all of that, right? Hayunot Lot Shcharan Mitrumat Halishka. They would receive their payments also from Trumat Halishka, says the Braita. Abba Shaul Omer, he says, no, he is going to give a different example. Nashim Yikarot B'Yerushalayim, namely the wealthy women of Jerusalem, Hayu Zanot Otan U'Mefarnesot Otan. They were the ones who paid for these other women to raise their children in Tahara. Ba'emine Rav Huna. And now we go on Mirav. So Rav Huna asks the following question as we get to the next Amud, and here is where we get to this whole discussion of from what items are paid for from what budget line. Okay, first case, Klei Sharet Mahu, the temple vessels, based on what? Shiasu Mikadshe Bedek Habayit. Shall we say that they should be made, in other words, paid for, okay, from the maintenance of the temple, of the Beis Hamikdash? Tzorech Mizbeach Minhu. After all, they are, like I jokingly said, a ritual item, okay? their needs for them is for the altar. Umikadshe berek habayit atu o sorach korban ninhu. We say that they come from the maintenance of the Beis Hamikdash, or do we say since they are required for the altar, in other words, part of the sacrificial worship, the avoda, and therefore, umitrumat halishka hayu osinotan, and therefore they should be coming from that budget line, so to speak, from that money. Amarle, he said to them, Ein ne'asin ela mitrumat halishka. They are not done except from the public treasury of Beis Hamikdash. Eitive. But somebody comes to challenge with another Braita. After all, I'm going to cite a pasuk, says the Braita, V'kechalotam heviu lefnei hamelech v'hoyanda hakohen et shar hakesef v'yasehu kelim lebeit Hashem klei sharet. According to this pasuk in Divrei Yamim, right, when they finished, let's say, the first allotment of money from one of the sources, it then says they brought the money to Yehoyada, right, and the rest of the money, which was gold, right, they used it to make the kelim, for the Beis Hamikdash. Amarle. So he says to him, challenges him with this real slap in the face, I thought, the akarayich, that the one who read, namely taught you ketuvim, lo akarayich navieh, he didn't teach you navi, namely, I'll cite it opposite pasuk, ach lo yaaseh beit Hashem sfot v'gomer ki laosei hamlacha yitnuhu, rather the second, they were not made for the house of Hashem, these cups, but rather they gave to them that they did work. In other words, no, they were made not from leftover money, but from fresh money, so to speak. Ihachi, if that's the case, kashu kara'ei ha'adadi, then it would seem that our psukim contradict one another. Lo kasha kan. No, we don't have to say that they disagree. Kan shagavu vahotiru. In one case, we're saying where they collected money and they had extra money left over. Kan shagavu valohatiru. And in another case, we say they collected the money, but they didn't have enough left over to use it. So the Gemara questions this. V'chigavu vahotiru mai have. And if they collected the money and they had left over, what was to be done with it? Amar Rabbi Abahu, says Rabbi Abahu, Leiv Beidin matne alehen im hutzruchu v'im lav yehu leklei sharet. Namely, that Rabbi Abahu is arguing that it was the role of the Beis Din, in other words, the Sanhedrin, to come to a decision. They would imply what was the intent of the use of this money, and namely that if there was a need, they would do that need to make the new utensils, the temple vessels. And if they did not have a need, for it, other reasons, then they could use it, for the temple vessels. Tana debe Rabbi Yishmael. Now it was taught in the academy of Rabbi Yishmael. Kli sharet ba'in mitrumat halishka. His academy said that the temple utensils, temple vessels, that was either made or paid for from the trumas lishka. Shenamar et sha'ar hakesef. What's the remainder of the silver? Ezu kesef sheyesh lo shiarim. What kesef, money here, do we say that there was left over? Have omer ze trumat halishka. This must refer to the trumas halishka, because remember we said that the money was taken out seriatim at different points of the year. Ve'ema shirayim gufayim. But maybe I would say we're talking about the money itself. What do we mean the rest of the money? In other words, are we talking about what's left in the chamber after the first withdrawal? Is that our question? Kida Amar Rava, as Rava said, Ha'ola, when the Torah refers to the Ola, Ola Rishona, it's referring to the first Ola offering. Hachanami, here too, HaKesef, when it refers to the money, Kesef Rishon, that's referring to the first withdrawal of money from Trumas Halishka. Meitive. But we'll challenge that, says the Gemara. HaKetoret. We've got an example where it says the incense. V'chol karbanot tzibur ba'im mitrumat halishka. The incense and all of the communal offerings are paid for from the Trumas Halishka. Mizbeach hazahav, the golden altar, ulevona, and its particular incense, uklei sharet, and the utensils, the vessels, ba'in mimotar nisachim. It comes from what additional or left over from the nesachim, the nesach offerings, right? Mizbeach ha'olah, but the outside altar, right? The altar for the offerings, halishachot, the chambers in the whole temple, v'ha'azarot, and the courtyards, ba'in mikadshei berek habayit. The maintenance for those and their well-being is paid for from the, so to speak, berek habayit, the maintenance fees for the temple. Okay, chutz lechoma ha'azara, with the exception of the wall that surrounds the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Ba'in mishirei halishko. That comes from what's ever left over after taking care of the chambers themselves. Zohi sheshaninu, and that's what we taught. Chomat ha'ir umigdaloteha, the kol tzorchei ha'ir, namely the walls of the city and the towers and all the needs of the city. Ba'im mishirei halishka. That comes from what's left over in the lishka. Tanaihi. And now we tell us, it's the Gemara says us, that this is a machloka tanaim. The Tanan. Why? Because it was taught elsewhere in a Mishnah. Motar truma ma hayu osin baha. Okay, what was left over from the truma offering, what did they do with it? And the Gemara is going to tell us. Okay, so people would bring the truma. What would they bring it in? They would often bring it in. Some would bring it in baskets, the poorer people, but the wealthier people would bring it in bowls or platters of gold. Exactly. So what happens? Okay, riku'e zahav tzipui lebeit kodshei hakadoshim, that they would make those into sheets of gold, and they would melt it down and make it into sheets, okay, into the Holy of Holies, exactly. So what happens? Rabbi Yishmael Omer. Rabbi Yishmael tries to give another example. Motar perot. What about the produce that people brought that was left over? Okay, what did they do with that? Lekates hamizbeach. That was done for the, so to speak, dessert of the altar. In other words, when they didn't have other animals or things to burn on the altar, they would do that. Motar truma, what was left over from the truma, the clay sharet, that would go for the temple vessels. Rabbi Akiva is going to give a different answer. And Omer, he says, motar truma, what was left over from the truma, lekates mizbeach. There they said the same thing. Motar nisachim, what was left over from the nisachim offerings, the clay sharet. That's what went for the temple vessels. Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim Omer, he gives another suggestion. Motar nisachim, what was left over, excuse me, from the Nisachim offerings, Leketz HaMizbeach. That's what was put on the altar in alternate times, right? Motar Truma, what was left over from the Truma, Leklei Sharet. That's what went to the temple vessels. So the Gemara picks up and says, V'zeh v'zeh, namely the view of Rabbi Akiva and the view of Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim, right? Lo hayu modim b'peirot. They didn't acknowledge the example of the excess peiros. Peiros ma'ihi. So what do we mean when we say there may have been excess produce? The Tanya, okay, as taught elsewhere in the Braita. Motar truma, the excess of truma. Ma hayu osinba, what did they do? Lokhin peirot bazo. Okay, they at the temple treasury, okay, the gizbar, right? Remember, he would buy the produce at a lower price, right? Umochrin otam biyoker, and he would sell it for a higher price, okay, at a higher expense. In other words, those people who did not have, they could buy that, what they needed there in the stalls in the Beis HaMikdash, okay, but they would have to pay more. All right, so what happens? Okay, Vasachar mekitzan bo et hamizbeach. Okay, and whatever the extra money, the profit, so to speak, would be the repletion of the mizbeach. They would use that money then to maintain the altar, right? V'zohi sheshaninu, and this is what we taught, namely as follows. Motar perot leketz hamizbeach, that the excess peros, okay, was done for the, so to speak, dessert of the altar. Mai zeh v'zeh lo hayu modim b'perot. So what do we mean then when we said that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina Skan HaKohanim, okay, did not acknowledge this aspect of the peros, of the extra money from the produce, right? Ditnan, as we learn in another Mishnah. Motar shirei lishka, okay, any money that was left over from the lishkat hagazit, mahayu osin bahen, what did they do with it? Lokhin bahen yenot, they purchased with it the wine, shmanim, the oils, uslatot, the fine flour, vahasachar, and any profit, lahektesh, went to be hektesh. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. That's the view of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva Omer, he says, Ein mishtacharin or mistacharin b'shel hektesh. One cannot profit from items that had a hektesh designation. Af lo b'shel aniyim, especially if it was belonging to the poor. B'shel hektesh, my tamalo, regarding hekdesh, what is the reason we don't profit from it? Ein aniyut b'makom ashivut, because we say that there is no poverty in a place of wealth. In other words, the implication here is that the temple needed to be run in a first-class, lavish style. Okay, since it had to be shown to the people. Okay, that kind of
when they say they profited from it, how did they profit?
okay, well, the example of the produce would be that the farmers would come. Let's say you're a farmer and I'm the gizbar, real quick. All right, so you're bringing me certain produce, all right, as part of bikurim, as part of stuff for the kohanim, whatever. Okay, so that I would buy it for you at
Then they would sell it.
okay, and then what am I doing? I buy it for you at one price, but Marty comes and he needs, I don't know, something for bikurim. All right, he does from wherever okay, so I would sell it to him at a higher rate.
Yeah.
Okay, so the temple always made the profit. Okay, all right. So what happens here? So that's what it's saying, that the maintenance and the activities of the temple need to be done in a want to say lavish, classy. I don't know how Art Scroll translated it. Okay, Koren translated it in a grand or lavish manner,
Place of opulence.
place of opulence. Same concept, right? Okay. B'shel aniyim, and what belongs to the poor, my tamalo, why can't you do it, make money off that? Dilma mitrame laho aniya velekala mitva bele. Why? Because we might say a poor person would come unexpectedly, right? And what happens? And he would have nothing. One would not have money to give them. In other words, they needed also money to be able to give out as tzedakah to the poor. And we're going to stop at that point right there. Okay?
Interesting, the idea of payments, doing the voda.
Yeah.
So let's say take high ticket site, for people who work for the shul in terms of laning or davening or this and that, should they be paid or not?
That's true. That's a valid question.